What's up, everyone? Back again with some thoughts on the other Week 5 FlipGrid videos, the one about where we draw the line. And I wanted to tease this out a little bit with you guys. Some people had some really interesting responses about the question of health insurance and the question of the environment, things like that. And a couple of thoughts occurred to me. So I forgot to write down who it was. I think it might have been Maria. Sorry that I'm forgetting whose name it was. Mentioned the fact that like forcing people to get insurance isn't fair because of people who might not be able to afford to get insurance. And that's actually a really good point. And presumably the reason you do something like Obamacare or whatever is that you only force people to get insurance if you also try to make it more affordable for them to actually get the insurance. And that's why they did things like expand Medicare, Medicaid, and why they have these like support so that people could in theory at least afford it. But the idea here is similar to that with the environment, and it's the concept of the difference between directly harming somebody and indirectly harming somebody. So if you directly harm somebody, your action directly causes some harm to one other person. The environment and health insurance doesn't work that way, right? Because if you don't recycle or you pollute, that doesn't in itself harm the planet. It's only when lots and lots and lots of people do it that we have a huge problem, right? I mean, obviously it harms the planet a little bit if you do it, but it's the cumulative effect of lots of people doing it. So then the question is, like, do you have to have regulations and policies that are in place to sort of stop people from like collectively causing harm, right? So it's actually the same with health insurance, and this is probably a little in the weeds, so it's hard to understand. But when it comes to health insurance, the argument is if you don't force relatively healthy people to get health insurance, then sick people won't be able to get health insurance because it'll be insanely expensive for them because health insurance companies won't give them insurance because they don't want to cover just sick people. It's a bad business deal for health insurance companies. So health insurance companies would only do it if they could also give policies to healthy people to kind of offset their costs. So what happens, right, is if you don't you don't force some people to get insurance, other people can't get it, so they get harmed because, sure, maybe they couldn't afford health insurance, but what they really can't afford is to go bankrupt when they get a cancer diagnosis or to go bankrupt when they have to be hospitalized for 10 days or something like that. I had to be hospitalized for about 10 days when I was in college, and I think the bill was like $250,000, right, if there was no insurance. So that's it. That's the ball game. Like, I'm done, right, if that's the case. So these are the things that we're sort of talking about, right? And then, of course, if people don't have insurance and they go to the emergency room, the taxpayer's picking up that bill, and then ultimately that raises health insurance costs for everybody else also. So the basic idea of forcing people to get health insurance, and we could, there's a whole argument about whether it works or not, but the idea is that you do this because people not having health insurance harms others. But right, here's the important part. It's not when one person doesn't do it, it's when we all don't do it, or a lot of people don't do it, that it harms others. It's like wearing masks, right? If you don't wear a mask in the during the pandemic, sure, you're at risk to yourself, but let's say that you're very healthy, you're just not worried about it. The likelihood that you're going to cause a massive pandemic is low. But when lots of people don't wear masks, that fact makes the pandemic much worse. And so you have 500,000 people dead and counting. And it's not as if we could say, like, it's this person's fault, right? It's sort of everybody's fault. So are those type of regulations justified? And what I thought was interesting is some people said, well, I don't think it's fair in terms of health insurance, but I do think it's fair in terms of the environment. And what I want to push you guys on a little bit is, what's the difference? Like, if anything, the environment seems harder because that's about people that aren't even born yet. That's about generations that don't even exist. Whereas when we talk about these other issues, regulations on what we eat. Of course, we don't mean you would like make certain foods illegal, but you could tax them highly, right? We could have taxes on beef. We could have taxes on, food that demands a lot of intensive agriculture. And what that does is it incentivizes people to eat and buy and make things that are better for the environment. But all of these things are things that Mill thought would be too much, right? Because they would interfere too much with liberty. And the question for you guys to think about is, how do we balance this idea of liberty with the idea of the common good? And what's interesting about Mill is Mill thought that the two go together, that like the more liberty we have, the better a society we have. But I think that's something that we can question today and wonder like, well, is that really true? Because if people all buy SUVs because that's just what they want to do, it seems like the harm to society in terms of the climate is pretty profound. So maybe there's a disconnect between liberty and the common good, and that Mill's ideas here are just a little bit outdated. Maybe not, right? But that's what I want you guys to think about. But part of doing this is just kind of thinking about the complexity of the actual facts on the ground when it comes to the environment, when it comes to health insurance. But anyways, I thought good job with the videos. I've been enjoying listening to them, and I'm glad that I'm doing these videos a little bit more often now to give you guys some feedback on them. Look forward to hearing your week 6 as well. Okay.